Hello, I'm Richard Murphy. I'm talking the day after Margaret Thatcher's favourite think tank, the Centre for Policy Studies, plus MP Jake Berry, issued a report calling for what they called a Northern Big Bang. What does that mean? Well, it's a direct parody of what Margaret Thatcher did in the 1980s when she liberated the City of London, or so they claimed, to receive foreign direct investment, actually basically money from the USA, to transform the way in which the city worked, to sweep away generations of inbuilt prejudice against those who had not gone to public schools, and to reform markets so that they could compete better on a global trading platform. Well, you can argue whether that worked or not. I would suggest it led, of course, to the 2008 financial crisis in the end. But Jake Berry and the Centre for Policy Studies want to, they claim, replicate this in the north of England now by putting into place a number of economic proposals, all of which come out of the standard recipe for redevelopment that think tanks from the centre and further right often put forward at, well, any time and not just after the coronavirus crisis. There's some absolutely bog standard stuff in here that is so routine that the fact that it's said again is almost an embarrassment. They want to change planning law. Every time the right wing want to change the way in which the UK is going to deal with an economic crisis, they claim that we need to change our planning law, as if the creation of large numbers of grey sheds scattered across the countryside is somehow miraculously going to create a growth potential for the economy when there are already large numbers sitting empty, but for the fact that in the short term they've all been hired to deal with the Brexit crisis. So that's a complete non-starter. But let's look at the rest of what they claim as well. They claim that there's a shortage of foreign direct investment into the north of England. Well, that's really rather hard to substantiate, and I'll explain why. Foreign direct investment is the money that comes in from outside the UK to invest in UK companies. The fact that there's a shortage of foreign direct investment in the UK, in the north of England, has nothing to do with the north of England at all. It's just because actually buying a company in the UK counts as foreign direct investment. You don't actually have to invest anything, you just have to buy the shares in a UK company. And the vast majority of companies in the UK are registered in London because that's where the epicentre of the London financial markets is. So this does not prove that the North has actually suffered less foreign direct investment than any other part of the country, because, very largely, there's very little actual real foreign direct investment in the UK at all, because most of what happens in the UK is purely speculative, and this money is foreign speculators buying UK companies. Therefore, to claim that there's some sort of shortfall for this reason is, to be candid, wrong. But what do they say? They want to address this shortfall in foreign direct investment. First of all, they want to create a bond which is targeted at large companies. Staggeringly, there's no bias within this whole paper towards small companies. In fact, every single measure is focused at large companies. There's a minimum amount that must be invested of 20 million before anybody can be considered for support by the programs that they put forward. They suggest there's a minimum number of employees attached to many of the ideas as well. So the local businesses that actually already populate the north will in many cases be completely excluded from the measures that the CPS is putting forward. That's very odd. And this bond is, of course, simply going to be a way of attracting hot money from abroad into the north of England, from which the money will, of course, automatically be repatriated again out of the north of England, leaving very little mark left behind after the event. It's a poor economic policy with a very poor proven track record, so not a good basis for reform. They want to issue bonds to transform the economy, but again, they're not trying to get local people who are saving, as people do after economic crises, to invest in these bonds. No, it's the international investment market that they want to target. That's ridiculous. They want to attach some significant tax subsidies to these bonds as well. They want to pay basically 10% of the cost of a company investing in the north of England out of government money. Now, I have no problem with providing subsidies, but I do on a blanket basis, and I do on a situation like this where there's no proven case as to why one project should be supported over another. All subsidies should be given on a project-by-project basis, in my opinion. And I rather strongly suspect that actually this regional policy may fall foul of the rules of the World Trade Organization, which have replaced those of the EU and which still bar us from doing this sort of subsidy. So I'm not quite sure they've thought their logic through there. And what else have they said? Well, they've claimed that there is a massive impediment to progress, which is the fact that the UK does not give large companies a subsidy for their investment in capital equipment in the year in which the expenditure is incurred. 95% of UK companies do get full tax relief on their expenditure on capital equipment, as I do, for example, on buying the video camera on which I'm making this particular film now, in the year that the expenditure is incurred. That's the way the rules work for smaller companies. They want to provide that same advantage to large companies. Again, an extraordinary measure here of providing subsidy to large and often international companies without any proven reason why they want to do so. And let's also be clear, without any evidence that this actually does encourage real investment, as a recent paper that I put out showed to be the case. I am more than happy to see a reform of the UK capital allowance system, which is what they're referring to. What we have is, I acknowledge, archaic, but to give a blanket tax relief to all northern companies, ignoring Scotland on the way, ignoring Wales on the way, ignoring Northern Ireland on the way, and they of course also all have individual regional reasons why they might want to have such subsidies as well. The North is not peculiar when it comes to consideration of its disadvantage compared to those other places, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. So why it should be the North alone that gets this is completely unclear. But let's also just make a simple example. Suppose we have an asset, call it a lorry, and it's supposedly located in Doncaster, which is rather hard to prove in the case of a lorry because of course it will be out on the road, which just so happens to spend most of its time servicing customers in Grantham, which might for these purposes, being only a few miles further south, but be considered in the south. Should tax relief be given or not? This scheme would be a complete bureaucratic nightmare, the sort of thing that the right wing always say they don't want, but which this would create. Look, the Centre for Policy Studies have come up with a hodgepodge of all their old-fashioned, literally economics ideas, which are put together in a report as if this is something new. Well, it isn't. There's nothing new in here. But actually, at its worst is this thing. And this thing is the fact that what they believe is, if they change the rules a little bit, somehow or other, every entrepreneur in the country, or from around the world, is going to flood in to exploit the new relaxed rules as if they are the only impediment to people operating businesses in the UK. Well, if that was true, then frankly business would already be pouring in. We have light touch regulation in the UK, we have light touch employment law, we have light touch tax rules, we have a very low tax rate, we have generous reliefs already with regard to many incentives for inward investment. So there is nothing particularly special about what they're putting forward which is going to transform the situation. But that's always the case with these people. They never think about what business is actually going to do. They've never got an answer as to what sort of business they want to promote. They never have any idea how real business operates. They just believe that a little tweak to the rules will somehow make every business person respond as if the only impediment that they have is complying with another rule, when in practice, as I've just shown, this new regulation, which would have to require a definition of the North, which could be a real impediment to progress and create yet another internal border within the UK, could actually be a bigger impediment to progress than actually changing the rules for the UK as a whole. So, is this report a good idea? No. It's more bad economics by people who are out of ideas, whose business model has failed, who believe that tax is always there to be spent for the benefit of the private sector and very largely for the benefit of large businesses, so that wealth moves upwards from those who pay their taxes to those who benefit by having their large businesses subsidised. And the consequence will be not a lot. nothing whatsoever for the benefit of the north of England, which needs something much more radical. A Green New Deal which guarantees jobs in every constituency and new homes and new transport systems and new energy systems and new transmission systems. Those are the sorts of things that will change the fortunes of the north, not this. And the CPS hasn't got the courage to say that direct government intervention to drive programmes which will actually create new jobs is what we really require. This report is a failure. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in what I've been saying in this video, please subscribe. There is a button below the viewing screen. If you're interested in what I have to say on Twitter, I'm at Richard J. Murphy on that medium. If you want to look at my blog, that's taxresearch.org.uk. And we have a Facebook page as well, Richard J. Murphy. So one of those things will get you more information on what this video series is about, and I hope I'll see you again soon.